Hi guys, in this video we will be learning about the nature and role of transnational corporations, finishing with an exam style question.
So first of all, we're going to learn about the nature and role of transnational corporations, and these are essentially companies that operate in more than one country. So some very recognizable TNCs that you might know of are Coca-Cola, Apple, and Starbucks, and they're really recognized by their brand logos, which can be identified all across the world. So essentially, transnational corporations can be abbreviated to a TNC. So when you see this word, that's what it means. And as I mentioned before, it's a company operating in at least two countries. They can be based in many different economic sectors, and they no longer originate from developed regions. In the past, TNCs usually developed in developed countries, but now less developed countries are also the countries of origin of multiple TNCs. So TNCs tend to operate in more than one country for a variety of reasons. The first main reason is to escape trade tariffs. And for example, an example of this is that Nissan's decision to produce cars in Sunderland, which is an area in the north of the UK, was largely to gain barrier-free access to the lucrative EU market. Secondly, TNCs operate in more than one country to find lowest cost locations for their production. For example, production costs are often a lot cheaper in less developed countries. So if a TNC originated in a developed country, they outsource their production to another country where their production could be done for a lower cost. Thirdly, they relocate to reach foreign markets more effectively. For example, McDonald's originated in the United States, but has branched out to almost have chains in every single country in the world to access all the markets in the world, essentially. So they're in Asia, they're in Europe, they're in Australia and South America, not only remaining in the United States anymore. And finally, they also relocate and expand to exploit resources of foreign countries. For example, Africa is a very mineral and nutrient-rich continent, so a lot of companies outsource there to use the minerals and that are available in these countries and use them for their own products. So that's another reason for operating in more than one country. So the TNCs of the 21st century are now called globally integrated enterprises. And this means that these companies are prepared to locate different functions of its businesses anywhere across the world. And these decisions are usually made based on the cost, skill, and environment and whether they're suitable for that type of business. And they also pursue goals to integrate production and derive value from their worldwide operation. So essentially, state borders are now meaningless to corporate practice because they operate across borders and in most countries across the world. Now we're going to briefly look at the common characteristics of transnational corporations, and these include maximizing global economies of scale by organizing production in order to reduce costs. I mentioned this a bit before. It's cheaper to produce or develop things in less developed countries, so TNCs often relocate there. Secondly, sourcing raw materials or components at their lowest cost. In less developed countries, materials tend to cost less than they do in developed countries, so that's another reason for TNCs relocating. Other characteristics are controlling key supplies, also outsourcing their production. Branding is a big one. As I just showed you earlier on, there are those key symbols which are easily recognizable, such as the Apple logo, the McDonald's logo, and so on. And this is really key so that the brands are recognizable on the world's stage, essentially. And finally, they are also in control of processing at each stage of production. So this is enabled by the improvements in communication and transport and so on. So a company can directly control what's happening at each stage of the production process, even if it's being located in a different country. And this is through emails, Skype, and so on. So they can really take control of the process, even though they're not directly watching over it. Now we're going to look at the spatial organisation of transnational corporations, and typically they're very flexible in the location of their global assets. Traditionally, the headquarters have been located in major cities in their home country. This is typically developed countries, but I mentioned earlier on in the video that developing countries are increasingly becoming or developing their own TNCs, so this is actually shifting. Subsidiary headquarters are usually on each continent, so they can oversee work going on in each continent and so on, and they tend to have offices where main operations are based. And back in the home countries, the work shifts from initially production and manufacturing, and then when these activities are outsourced to countries where the production costs are cheaper, they then engage in more research and development activities and financial services where they have higher education levels due to the presence of university facilities and also a large graduate labour market. Those people moving out of university can then go and be sourced and brought into these big companies, and this is an activity that kind of happens more in developed countries where less people work in manufacturing and production services and more people are working in skilled, kind of more academic work. Now we're going to look at the different types of production involved with TNCs. So starting with the primary sector, this is typically production operations where materials and products are being produced, and they're usually the primary sector jobs are located in locations of unexploited resources. So typically this is occurring a lot in Africa at the moment, where they have a rich supply of minerals, and also places where oil is located. So typically it's occurring in developing countries because developed countries have typically already exploited all their resources. And in the home countries, this is where they will develop new technology to exploit these resources, and this also causes the price of resources to increase worldwide. However, processes have actually been developed to start using the resources available in developed countries again. As I mentioned before, usually all oil resources in developed countries have been depleted, but a process of fracking has been developed, and this has revitalised the oil and gas industry in North America, as it's been able to extract even more oil and gas from the land, even though it had pretty much already been used up. Then we have the secondary sector, and secondary sector is more related to manufacturing the materials that have been sourced through production, which we saw in our primary sector, and these also occur in developing countries, most typically South and Southeast Asia, and I'm going to come on to the attractiveness of locating these secondary sector jobs in manufacturing in Southeast Asia now. So the reason why this area attracts TNCs is because of low labour costs. This is usually due to the high population, and typically in countries in Southeast Asia like China, they have large populations. They're not all highly educated, so a lot of them are available to work in the manufacturing sector. It's easy to invest in education, so it's very easy to train these workers because of the large population to work in their factories. Also, people in Asian countries typically have a very good work ethic. They will typically work for very long hours and take few holidays. And currently they're in a non-unionised labour environment, so TNCs get away with a lot of human rights violations, making people work in harsh conditions for long hours, which in developed countries, the workers would actually protest against these conditions. But these workers here don't have many rights, and so therefore cannot challenge these TNCs to do something about the cruel conditions that they're working in. Also, there are many government incentives that attract TNCs to work in Asia and Southeast Asia, such as tax-free breaks, few environmental regulations. They can easily pollute the environment without much restriction, and they also have large enterprise zones with low business rates, so this makes it very attractive for TNCs to come and work there. And then thirdly, we have our services industry, and this is the tertiary sector where we have a low labour cost and we also have good education. This typically occurs in the home country, which is typically a developed country, where they have proximity to their markets. So services are where no physical good is being made, but a service is being given. So an example of this is call centers. So many companies locate their call centers in India, and this is because India has quite a high standard of education, as I mentioned before, but similarly, they still have low labor costs. So it's very cheap for countries to locate their call centers there. Also, India is a former colony, so they speak very good English, and it's a very low cost alternative to, for example, a company having their own call centre within the UK if it's a British company, because the workers in the UK call centre would demand higher wages than those would in India. So it would be a lot more expensive for an English company to run their call centres in the UK. So that's why they remotely use call centres in India and so on. Now we're going to look at linkages, trading and marketing patterns of transnational corporations. So firstly, one of the features of TNCs is that they have the ability to expand and also gain more control of their industry and markets. And they do this by integrating different parts of the business through investment, takeovers and mergers and so on. So there are two different types of integration that we're going to look at. Firstly, looking at vertical integration. And vertical integration is an arrangement where the supply chain of a company is owned entirely by that company, from the raw materials to the finished product. Everything is owned by that one company. So they have complete control over the supplies, stocks, and the finished products. And this reduces the overall cost of the business because of economies of scale. So they don't owe any money to any other company because they own the entire production process from the raw materials at the beginning to the end product. And this is typical for companies such as BP, who operate on the production of natural resources such as oil. So, for example, BP owns their shipping fleets, the refineries, the exploitation. They also own the pipelines, and they also have the rights to exploitation and production in 40 countries worldwide. And overall in the UK, they have 1,100 retail stations. So as you can see from this example, they own every single part of the process of producing their product, which is obviously petrol. And through owning the pipelines, the refineries and so on, and also having these rights just to explore and produce oil in different countries, makes it increasingly cheap for BP because they have so much access and they're not restricted at all, and they don't owe money to any other companies. So that's vertical integration. But then we also have horizontal integration, and this occurs when a company diversifies its operations by expanding through a merger or a takeover. So this is when two companies might merge together to make one bigger company, or one company might be taken over by another company, and this is usually done for complementary or competitive reasons. So it tends to give a broader capability at the same stage of production if two companies merge together, because obviously they will have double the amount of factories and so on if they're in a manufacturing process. And an example of this is that Kraft Foods, which is a food transnational corporation, took over Cadbury, the chocolate company, in 2010, and this allowed them to diversify their food products just from food and groceries. And by taking over Cadbury, they were then able to enter into the confectionery market as well. So now, to finish off on the topic of transnational corporations, we're going to look at some of the benefits and costs of TNCs, both for the host country, for the TNC, and for the country of origin. So for the host country, the benefits of TNCs are that they generate jobs and income, they bring new technology, give workers new skills, and it also has a multiplier effect. However, the problems for the host country are the poor working conditions, the exploitation of resources. There are also negative impacts on the environment and local culture, as well as economic leakages and repatriation of profits, which means that the money that is injected into the host country is actually taken back to the country of origin by the TNC, so they don't actually reap all the benefits of the country locating itself there. The benefits for the TNC itself is that they are able to have lower costs because of the cheaper land and lower wages, greater access to new resources and markets, and also fewer controls such as environmental legislation. However, the problems are related to ethical issues such as image of environmental damage or sweatshops, which can be detrimental to their reputation, and also social and environmental conscience. So essentially, when consumers find out that the TNCs have located to a developing country and they're using sweatshops, which are really intense factories where humans are working in really, really poor conditions for long hours, they decide not to buy these products anymore because they see that they're not being produced in social or environmental caring ways. And finally, looking at the country of origin, the benefits for them are that cheaper goods are then able to be produced for their consumers. They can also therefore specialise in financial services and R&D occupations, which stands for research and development, which are obviously more high-skilled and more high-paid jobs than the manufacturing jobs. However, the problems here are related to the loss of manufacturing jobs because they've been outsourced to other host countries, which leads to deindustrialization and structural unemployment, as these people who have lost their manufacturing jobs therefore are no longer skilled for any other type of job and are then remain unemployed, and it takes a lot of money to retrain them to work in other jobs. So now we're going to answer an exam style question relating to transnational corporations. So the question asks us to analyse the benefits and cost of TNCs to their countries of origin and for the host country. So here we need to look at the countries of origin and the host country in particular, nothing else, just the benefits and costs for each one. So it's good to divide the question up into two parts, looking at the benefits and costs for the countries of origin and then for the host country to get us our whole 6 marks. So the first thing we're going to do for this question is actually to define what a transnational corporation is. So I wrote, transnational corporations are companies that operate in at least 2 countries with a headquarters based in their country of origin and business operations located in host countries. So this really shows that you understand what a TNC is before you go and talk about the costs and benefits. And then I've gone on to give a bit of extra detail saying that TNCs therefore have both positive and negative effects on both their host countries and countries of origin. So I've decided to talk about the costs and benefits for the country of origin first. So my first point is going to be that in the country of origin, TNCs allow for the consumption of cheaper goods, and they also enable the host country to specialise in more high-skilled and high-paid work in financial services and research and development. So that's one of the benefits of TNCs for the country of origin. So that's one part of our question ticked off. And then the next thing I'm going to do is give one of the costs for the country of origin. So it's essentially for these type of questions, you give for the one side, for the country of origin, you give a benefit and a cost, and then you do the same for the host country, give another benefit and cost, and this should hopefully give you your 6 marks. So a cost for the country of origin is that TNC operations can also lead to the loss of manufacturing jobs in the country of origin, which can lead to deindustrialization and structural unemployment. So that's everything done for the country of origin now. Moving on to the host country, I've then said for the host country, TNCs generate jobs and income whilst also giving the workers new skills and bringing new technologies into the country, thus potentially aiding development. That is our benefit of TNCs for the host country. And then finally, I've gone on to state a cost. So I said, however, many workers for TNCs in host countries may be subjected to poor working conditions. Furthermore, TNCs might exploit the natural resources of the host country and cause significant negative impacts on the environment and local culture of the host country. So that is the end of that question.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're looking for an amazing A-level geography resource, join me today in my series of engaging bite-sized video tutorials. See you soon, and together let's make A-level geography a walk in the park.